They are coming for our children. Over 40% of teen girls get pregnant before they turn 20. Yet only 20% of parents say that they give their teenagers too much freedom. So what is the cause of this and other teenage rising issues such as loneliness and suicide? Today, we are going to discuss 3 enemies that are intentionally attacking our children. And for those of you who stay with us until the end, we've got one extra bonus point as well. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. We are so grateful that you have decided to join us. We're your hosts. I'm John Heine, and we've got my close friend, Devin Shaw. Devin, how are things going up in Iowa today?
Yeah, good. It's warming up. So
good.
Liking that.
What are you at? What's the temperature at?
Gosh, what? Mid-40s?
Woohoo! Okay, mid-40s, exactly.
Well, I mean, when it's typically 0 or in the teens, I'm taking it. Yeah.
That's right. It was like 10 days ago, we were at, and I told this to you, 15 degrees, but we're at 72 today.
So, wow. Texans
I know.
are spoiled, man.
We are for the brief period of time, and then the sun comes out in May and we feel it. So anyways, well, cool. Well, hey, if you like what we're talking about, we like to go into an extended edition inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus every week. So head over to Catholic Gentleman Plus. It's a great way to support us. We'd love to see you in there. We've got over 21 sessions. Well, we got 21 sessions exactly of courses for men to help you better your lives. I also want to do a shout out to our sponsor today, Holy Habits. We get to talk about them more in the episode, but a really great app. I've heard some great compliments from our listeners, and I'm grateful for you guys checking that out. We are also building a studio that we can have a live in-person conversation. It's going to have that cigar lounge feel. We need your help. We've got to get some new cameras, some new lighting, some backdrops. I'm building the walls. Devin's helping me with the design. And so we just love it if you could support us in that. Head over to catholicgentleman.com/support or click on that link in the show notes. Every little penny helps us, and we couldn't be more grateful for all of our current donors as all of these future donors. So if God puts that on your heart, we'd be grateful. And so diving right in here, we just want to start out. These enemies that we're going to be talking about come from a really phenomenal book that Devin wrote called Lead. I'm actually sold out. The Catholic Gentleman sold out, but Stewardship is not. And so I'm going to put that link in the show notes if you like what we're talking about today. But it's really a beautiful and incredible topic. And so, Devin, why don't you set the stage? What made you think about these enemies for our children that might not be too obvious for our listeners?
Well, yeah. So years ago, when I founded the Fathers of St. Joseph, we had a local chapter, which we'd have all these guys. I mean, a lot of guys would attend week after week. And as the basis of St. Joseph's spirituality is 4 pillars, and one of those is embracing the child. And part of embracing the child is being the protector. And I started doing a deep dive. What does it really mean to be a protector? And what I started becoming very uncomfortable because I realized, number one, that I wasn't being a protector truly. I wanted to be, but I didn't have a clue. And really fundamentally, in order to be a protector, you're a warrior. In order to be a warrior, which means you're fighting, you have to know who you're fighting against. And I realized very quickly, I had no idea. Obviously, it's easy to say, well, the devil's the enemy. Or the culture is the enemy. Yeah, but it's deeper than that, so much deeper. So if we don't, what I came to realize is if I neglect to identify who the enemy is in all of his forms, as many as I can identify, I'm going to lose the battle. And the last battle that I want to lose is my children, losing their souls, losing them to the world, So the big question for me is, how can I win this war? How can I defeat the enemy and keep my kids pure, allow them to experience joy, not to be overwhelmed by compare and despair, and all that. And so I just started doing more of a deep dive on who the enemy is. What are his many forms? What are some of his methods and strategies? And one of the things I realized very quickly is that the devil cannot create. Okay. So the devil cannot create ex nihilo, like from nothing. Only God can. So what the devil's initial strategy, his fundamental strategy is because he hates God and God is good and God's creation is good, he takes creation, whatever is good, and then he attaches himself to it and maligns and redefines that good so that that good speaks evil or accomplishes evil. So that's the basis of his plan. So he takes a good and he perverts it. It becomes like evil becomes like a living parasite on a host source. It's like a mosquito sucking a human being's blood. That mosquito can't survive unless it's getting that blood. The devil and his evil ways cannot survive unless he's sucking off of God's goodness. So he perverts it. So that's where these enemies come from.
I think that's so great. And actually, as we go for our listeners, as we go through each of these three enemies, and if you hang with this to the end of that bonus one, let's lay that point out of like, what is this good that's being perverted or being twisted by Satan? I think that's such a good point. I also want to take a step back and just talk about the importance of enemies, because this was something for me as a new father. You wrestled with this as well, and you actually put it into a tangible format within this great devotion for men and fathers, which is lead amazing. But that being said, when I was wrestling with it, you hear those things like you're saying, oh, Satan's doing this to our kids, or culture is doing this to our kids. And while there might be some truth to that, that's like tackling the ocean, right? Like ending world poverty. Like, these things are just like so huge in the minds of each father that wrestling with that or solving with that, that's not practical. That doesn't break it down to these chunks that we're going to go through here that can actually give, like, this directly is the enemy. This is how it displays itself within the lives of your family and your children. And this is what you as a father can be doing to combat against that. This just provides so much more clarity and so much more hope and so much more practical guidance to fathers. So I'm grateful for that, Devin.
Yeah, unless you've got a nuclear bomb, you're going to have to defeat the enemy, soldier by soldier or platoon by platoon, and that's what we have to do here. We have to break down the enemy's army, and we have to tackle him one by one. And I think fundamentally, too, there's something else. Fundamentally, we have to understand that the goal of our children, the goal of our lives, at least subconsciously, is that we want to be happy. Happiness is fundamental to all of this. And so what's going on is God's offering true happiness, and he has his way of doing that. The devil wants to pervert these goods and say, this is the way to happiness. And as children, we're so easily duped. We're young. We're naive. And so when the devil offers us a path to happiness that is the perversion of a good, we're all too willing to take it.
That's right. That's right. The army commanders in history never said, we have to win this war. Let's go. They actually said, we have to win this war. Wait, who's our enemy? Who's we're fighting? Let's break this out. Let's put out that map. Let's figure out our strategy so that we can be most effective in the defense as well as the offense within that which we are about to talk about. So great. So let's just dive right in. And we are talking to fathers here as we are fathers ourselves. And I know a lot of parents will get help out of these things. So the first one, and don't just jump past this one, because we're relating it as it goes towards our children. So this first one here is the perversion of sex in our culture, in our families, maybe even our own personal lives. And we've talked about this quite a bit on previous episodes, such as Lust, Sin, and How to Win. We also discussed this and how to talk to your wife about sex. But right now, we're talking about the enemies that are attacking our children. And so just to start out, again, what we were talking about is, what is the good that's being perverted? So Devin, what is the good that is being perverted when we're talking about this?
Well, we're talking about sexual union. And sexual union obviously is very good because God created it, and he created it to be very pleasurable, which is excellent. But let's face it, the goods or the consequences of sexual union is that it unites, it bonds in a permanent way. It generates offspring and spiritual life. It teaches fidelity and sacrificial love and self-giving disinterestedly. It also affords the ability to forgive when you're that intimate with someone and then you offend someone. It actually cultivates a context or creates a context in which we're more willing to forgive. And so all of this we're talking about unification, bonding, generating life, fidelity, sacrifice, self-giving love. All these things are the fundamental components that build a society. So if you want a solid society, you need to have solid marriages. You want solid marriages, you need to have solid sexual union. Well, the devil hates this because all of this is just a simple reflection of Christ and his church, his sacrificial love, his fidelity,
Yep.
the church's fidelity, the Trinitarian self-giving love. So what's the devil want to do? He's got to malign and redefine that sign that good so that it becomes something bad. And how does he do that? By offering a false means of happiness by saying, look, if you do this outside of marriage, when you're 13, when you're 14, when you're 16, with that guy or with that girl, it's going to be great. But kids don't understand trauma and wounds and the pain of ongoing healing that's demanded from things like this. So the devil, he wants to destroy this goal, this good of sexuality.
That's right. That's right. And so he perverts it by making it all about the pleasure, or for our young daughters and sons, all about, perhaps seeking love and like a caring connection that they've lacked.
Yes.
Please.
No, you're right. I mean, that's exactly right. They like, especially with girls, they want to be wanted. They love to be loved, and so the offering of her body of sex is a way for her to obtain that falsely.
Exactly. And we see the distortions in our society from everything from, gender ideologies and identities, as well as obviously the rampant, increase of of pornography within the digital space. We see this, billions and billions of dollars being funneled into this, which just is a complete and total perversion.
Trillions.
And trillions, exactly, a victory of Satan's. And if we're not on our guard, if we're not helping our children see the beauty of the sexual union, they get this either black and white distorted view. It's, they're trying to navigate this territory blindly, or they see it as evil, right? Puritans, Gnostics, those things came out. They can come out honestly within Catholic circles as well. If we're too rigid, if we're not showing our kids and talking through these things with our kids, this can become a really dark and confusing. We can just let me just say, I think this all boils down to, I see so many parents that cannot give what they don't have. And so it's what's kind of coming to me right now is this idea that if you're a father and you actually don't know how to have these conversations, you don't know how to communicate, maybe you're not communicating this effectively with your wife, go back and listen to one of those other episodes, because you have to get this right within your heart, within your life, within your prayer, within your communications with other people, so that you can then get it right in your communication for your children, so that you can live it right as you are guiding and directing. But you've got to be able to receive that. You got to be able to have that so that we can give forward. And there was another statistic that I was, in preparing for this episode, that I came across, of those teen pregnancies. So this is a 2022 study. Of those teen pregnancies that were interviewed, they made them connect and click on, three of the reasons why you fell into teen pregnancy. And the poor communication with their parents, 75% of the women that connected or took this survey that had already had teen pregnancies selected that. 75% of those that are pregnant before they're 20 years old, like I talked about at the beginning, are attributing one of the deciding factors or reasons to that, poor communications with parents. But here's the thing, parents, you can't just communicate what you don't know how to communicate, right? You can't just communicate that which you don't know how to give, which you've not received. And so I guess that's where I'm coming to at this moment in the episode. And I know that we've got other things that we'd like to talk about regarding this, but Devin, just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because just my own personal experience and my wife's experience is that our parents just didn't talk to us about this stuff. And so there's this deafening silence, which breeds curiosity. And especially then, like, my wife's mom was like, oh, finally when she talked about it, it's like, oh, it's awful, it's bad, it's, blah. And so then that creates even more curiosity, because like whenever a kid is told don't do that because it's bad, immediately they're like, well, I want to know why it's bad. And so I think that it's like mold. Mold grows in the dark and it metastasizes, or it just, you have mold in the basement, it's in the dark and it gets in the walls and you don't do anything about it. Man, pretty soon your whole house is infested and then you're sick and you're dying. And this is the way it is with sexuality, is like if you don't talk to your kids about sex, if you don't have the proper vision about sex, if you're not equipped and armed to talk to your kids about sex properly, it's like mold in the dark. You think your kids are fine. I remember a guy said, we're talking about young boys using their cell phones to access porn. And his son was like 12. And he's like, not my son. I'm like, okay, cool. Might want to check on that, but cool. Because the stats show that by the time he's 12 or 13, was it like 80% of them boys have seen pornography, on their phones. And next week I see him, he goes, yeah, my boy, so the point is that we can put our head in the sand all we want, pretend that this doesn't exist, and my kids are going to be fine and they're going to figure it out. But this is the issue, even after they're married, is to continue those conversations about sexual intimacy. So I think that we should talk about perhaps the mistakes that we make and I think the first one is obvious based on what we're saying here, is that when a father or a mother, but especially the father and the mother together, avoid or neglect discussing sex with their children, huge mistake. Like I said, it's like mold that's going to grow in the wall. It's going to kill your kid, and they're going to find out. But they're going to find out from the wrong resources. They're going to find out online. They're going to find out from their friends.
They will. Their friends. And then finding out from their friends at such a young age, their friends are confused and wrestling with this notion as well, right? I mean, it's the blind leading the blind in this situation. I couldn't agree more. Even if they just heard it in passing and that curiosity has peaked, even if you have protected them from other influences and sources and stuff like that, the imagination can take over. And so, yes, we as fathers have to lead that communication. We have to be the one that's there having this conversation with our kids. And another point that I know you brought up in your book here that I think is spot on is not reducing it to biology only. And this is going to be a big thing. And I'll just use my own personal experience. It was my father who did not talk to me about this, like you just stated. My mother who did, and I don't know in their conversation what got them to that point. But my mother talked to me about it, but it was very much the biology and it was very much of the sin. And so it was like, I knew sex before marriage was a mortal sin, and I knew that masturbation was a mortal sin, but I didn't know the why. I didn't understand the beauty of sexual attraction and love. And I didn't get any of that. And so let's not reduce it to just, this is what animals do. Let's talk more about the details within, the beauty within that which has been perverted. Let's talk about the good that has been perverted, right? We've got to go to the good, and we have to understand that. Hey, Catholic Gentleman users, I have a new phenomenal app that I am incredibly excited to present to you today. Are you struggling with a sin that you just keep on falling into over and over again, that recurring sin? Are you struggling to achieve habits that you've set forth? Are you struggling to even start habits that you know are going to better your life? If so, then this app is for you. And frankly, this app is for everyone because it sets you up for success in achieving those goals and achieving those habits that are going to transform your life. It will start at your root sin. You might not even know what that is. This app actually helps you understand that. And then you can set forth these achievable goals, not 15 at once, but maybe 2 or 3. You can have an accountability partner with your close friend, or you can do it with your men's group. It is all encompassing, a really phenomenal tool for us in our lives today. You can start for free now by heading over to holyhabits.app/gentleman or clicking on that link in the show notes. You can get 14 days for free right now by clicking on the link in the show notes or heading over to holyhabits.app/gentleman. And I hope to see you in there. God bless.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine when we were in, I think it was junior high. Yeah. Early in junior high, his dad was a biochemical engineer, I think, or something, chemist of some sort or something. And he literally had an easel and diagrams he'd drawn for his son. And his son just said it was the most horrific experience. He couldn't wait to get out of the living room and just hide, but it was all about the biomechanics of, how to have sex. And of course that didn't do anything. That didn't help anything, because he's like, well, I already knew about, 50% of it, but yet it didn't help him to stave off the interest, or maybe even the perversion of it. There wasn't a big why behind it. And I think a big mistake again here that we can make as dads in relating to how to talk about sex with our kids is that we relate our own personal experiences, the negative ones. Huge mistake. Huge. I've seen this over and over, like when I was leading youth groups and, just dealing with parents and couples. Like the dad or the mom says, yeah, when I was your age, I did X, Y, and Z, but I made it through it. And then the kid immediately intuits, well, you made it through it. You're okay. So I'm going to do it too. What's the big deal? But the kid doesn't understand the trauma and the wounds that mom and dad have and the problems in their marriage that exist because of all these pre-existing, situations, from junior high school, and college. Right. And so that's a huge mistake. It's like, even if your kid asks you point blank, well, what about you? Like, well, that's none of your business. That's between me and God. But for you, that's what we're focusing on, is you to be a great person, for you to have love and joy in your life in a way that you won't regret it,
Yeah. Yeah. The situation in which we approach this with our children also matters as well. And I liked how you brought that up with the diagram and stuff. No, sir. Take your son out on a fishing trip. Take him out to do something that's not in this classroom setting. And then also his eyes don't have to be like directly locked on you in this conversation. And you can start opening and developing that conversation. And honestly, what we've experienced is that openness and that curiosity. Our children turn to us, for more of the dialogue outside of the initial intent, and how beautiful that is, that they're coming to us with more of these questions and not going to their friends. And they probably are going to their friends. I don't want to pretend like I'm blind in that, but they are coming to us, which is a very beautiful reality, and something I'm incredibly grateful for. But again, we led that conversation to beginning, and the results.
Yeah, and I don't think that we can in this episode talk about how to talk to your kid about sex.
Agreed.
Because it's just too big of a topic, and we would have bullet points for that we could walk you through, and that should be an episode. But there are tons of resources out there that can help you with that. And I can just tell you right now, we've had this conversation with each of our children. And it's so powerful. Like at times it's very powerful when it clicks, when the child gets it and understands the beauty behind it and God's intention and plan. It clicks, so don't shy away from it, and plus it allows you to dive deeper for you to understand the beauty behind it. And you're in a sense experiencing sanctification in that area,
Without a doubt. Absolutely. You get to prepare yourself and get to hone your knowledge of this and how you can communicate and relate it to those that you love so dear. So the next enemy that we want to talk about here is pervasive media. And yes, this is an enemy, right? It is after our kids. Satan knows how to use technology, right? Trillions of dollars, like we talked about, just in distorting of sex. But also we see that if it bleeds, it reads, right? That there is this overwhelming fascination with dark and difficult realities within society that are just being pushed online all the time in news. We see, within the media and expanding to social media, we see cyberbullying. We see the toxicity of comparing yourself to other people, right? I'll just say a Polaroid snapshot of someone's life on Instagram is polarizing or is toxic, right? Is that we don't really get to know them. But all of these things are readily at the disposal of our children. But what is the good here, right? What is the good that's being distorted? And when I was just prepping for this, I was like, well, the communication with people far and wide, like that's a great good, right? The ability to pray for Pope Francis, for instance, because we know that he is sick right now. What a blessing that is. Helping those in need, right? The idea that, okay, I understand that I could go help adopt a child, or help a child in a third world country, or I could go help a well that's being built here, or see that drones are being created to drop care packages to help people in need, etc. Like there's a lot of good that comes from media, but there's a lot of ways that it's easily distorted. So Devin, thoughts on the goods?
Well, yeah, I think that this is pervasive media is where all of the enemies of our kids are going to just gather. That they're all right there online. I mean, it's a click away, whatever it is, whether it's perversion of sex or compared to spare culture, or whether it's pursuing wealth. And, not that that's bad in itself, but just that idea is bad in itself, I think, and popularity. These things are killing our kids. I think what they say, like Gen Z, 80% of Gen Z, their life goal is to be wealthy, and 50% of Gen Z, their life goal is to be famous. And they have twice the depression suicidality rate of the nation. So that just tells you where, like, if those are your goals, man, you're going to be depressed, So I think that you said something that was very interesting just a minute ago. You said that what is the good of this? That it allows us to communicate far and wide. I think actually that's true, but I think actually the good of technology, besides all that you said, is actually that it makes us communicate in the home. So technology becomes this context in which we have to learn to develop trust with one another. So basically, I'm entrusting my kids with this incredible power, to reach the world, to access the world, all this. I'm trusting them to use it rightly if I train them. And then they try to be trustworthy. And so that's where development of the relationship of trust begins, is right there. And so I think that this whole technology, social media thing, all of this stuff, although I recommend daughters and sons not being on social media. I like before a certain age, I don't know what that age is, but like my 18-year-old daughter who's in high school right now just deleted her Instagram page, turned off, TikTok. Why? Because there's just so much comparison culture and despair. So anyway, I just think that, guns are used for self-defense. Guns are used for hunting, but you don't give a 9-year-old an automatic weapon, right?
No.
Okay. You just don't.
That's right.
Because that kid's immature and hasn't developed the skills mentally to know when and how to use it. And that's akin to giving a kid smartphone technology with unrestricted, unfiltered, unregulated contact without supervision. So we've got to figure out how we can handle this with our children, how we can entrust them with this power, build them up to be capable of using this power without the power overcoming them.
Yeah, I like that point that you made on this being a way that we can grow in communication and relationship with our children, with those that we love, right? I mean, because we all know, we can think back to our lives when we were watching commercials, right? This form of media was everywhere. And what kid didn't want every single toy that came on the screen, every single Fruit Loops or Lucky Charms, or you name it, right? They were going to be the most delicious, and they promised happiness. As a susceptible child, boy, doesn't that sound good? But that's an opportunity for us, right, in using this media or digesting this media to communicate with our kids. But now going directly to what you're talking about here, we as fathers have a moral obligation and responsibility to protect our kids from these things, from certain things before they're even mature or mentally capable of understanding that which they're about to digest. And so I'm completely on the same page. I do think, though, for our listeners here, it's really important to discern, okay, maybe you have already given them access to the phone. Well, frankly, if that has happened, there's a whole different conversation. And I don't want to speak for Devin, but I don't think either of us would suggest you just rip that phone away from them right now. Yeah.
No.
And so there's a difference here. I mean, protecting them from it. And if they don't have a phone, absolutely withhold that phone. And withhold that, discern that with your wife. But I would say 16 plus, and then even if it's 16, it's texting and calling only, no internet access. But
good luck.
I know exactly.
No, I can't. I couldn't. I mean, you in a perfect world, sure, but it's not my house. I couldn't do that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so don't listen to Devin, listen to me. No, I'm joking.
Right.
But if you've already given them, going back, if they already have a phone since they were 12 years old, there's a whole different ball game that you have to approach it. And just becoming draconian and ripping it from them, something that they become attached, maybe even addicted to, because that's the whole point of these phones, right? If commercials of Fruit Loops are learned to get kids addicted to their cereal, I can promise you that all of the marketing message that's being twisted and distorted to connect your child to, happiness and different status or affiliation is absolutely grabbing their mind and their attention in a way that is contrary to that which you would like it to be.
Yeah. So if I am teaching one of my daughters wants to drive, let's say, do I just give her the keys to the car? No, she goes through either classes or we drive together. That's what we did. Spend hours and hours driving 3-point turns, how to drive on the highway, how to back up, all that stuff. It takes a lot of practice and you're doing it together in a sense. And then finally, she gets to the point where she can do it on her own. And I think that's the way we need to treat social media, way we need to treat use of technology, computers, smartphone technology is let's do this together. It's tough because it demands time, but that smartphone is no less powerful than that truck, my F-150. In fact, it may be more powerful. So if it's going to take me, months and months of investment in my daughter to teach her how to drive, well, I'm going to need to teach her how to drive that phone, and I'm going to have to invest in that. And that means a lot of conversations. And see, this is what's so beautiful about an involved dad is as long as he's not being dictatorial about this, as long as he's developing a conversation and he's opening her up to this ability to trust him, or the son, the ability to trust him. Because hey, I'm in this for you. I want you to have the best life experience. So I want to show you how to use the internet properly. Now, are they going to fail? Sure. Are they going to make mistakes? Sure. Are they going to click on something they shouldn't click on? Yeah, sure. But it's all about maintaining that open communication so that when that happens, they will come to you and not think you stupid idiot. Why did you do that? Yes. I trusted you. I gave you that phone and now you're abusing it. I'm going to take it away. You'll never get anywhere with your kids. You have to keep the lines of communication open. The way you do that is by being uncompromising in your beliefs, and you communicate to them, but you're in a sense compromising in mercy. You're very merciful.
Amen.
And you walk through that because you want whatever it is, all the virtues are power. We're trying to teach our kids how to use power.
That's right. And it's building of trust, right? And that's what we're talking about there. That trust that's built becomes this fortified bond where when you have a conversation about sex, like we just talked about, your kids come to you with more questions because you have built that trust and you have worked intentionally for it. So I think that's great. Let's move on to the third point in this episode. The third enemy that's coming after your child, our children, is peer pressure. I think this is a really good one. And this is also a dicey one, but it's one that definitely is, again, in better understanding the enemy, is one that we have to take head on and we have to be aware of. And so, again, grateful that you brought this one out. So what is the good? Well, the good is friendship. And how beautiful is friendship? I mean, I think of Aristotle. He said, there is nothing on this earth more to be prized than true friendship. We have St. Maximilian Kolbe, one of my favorite quotes, said, God sends us friends to be our firm support in the whirlwind of our struggles. In the company of friends, we will find strength to attain our sublime goals. Like, friends teach us relationships. They teach us how to be unified in, for a common goal or good. They teach us how to experience love that is not fully conditioned, in the sense that there's very little obligation behind a friend having to love, right? A friend chooses to love in a very unique way, and yes, they can stop that love, or we could even stop that love, to a certain degree with our current friends. But I think that's what makes it all the more powerful, is the fact that both are freely giving it continuously. And so anyways, friendship is a very beautiful aspect of our lives, from personal growth and development to to social development, as we've talked about, that there are things that we cannot do in isolation that we can only do with friends and in community.
Yeah. So what's the distortion then?
The distortion in its relationship to our children. I think you made a really good point earlier, Devin, was when I was talking about the distortion of communications. I was talking more on that broad general scale, but here we are in this conversation trying to talk about the distortion of it and how it relates to our children. And
Right.
so
Well,
I know you got, please.
Well, I just think that, like, anytime we elevate the creature to the level of the creator, we kind of like worship fitting in, we worship human opinion, we worship. So what's really going on, I see this all the time, is that parents who didn't have friends growing up or struggled to have friendship growing up tend to try to live vicariously through their children, so that they have a lot of friends and want them to fit in so badly, or they repress their children. So there's like, and then you got the other side of it. Parents who were popular in school, and then they just kind of pass on that idea of how to win and influence people to their kids, and saying this is the end all be all. So there's, yes, so the good is friendship, but then it can become very warped when it's about fitting in, it's or becoming popular, or excelling in winning human opinion. And our kids are already being blindsided and killed by this, right? So I think that the default, the two extremes, back to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, is the two extremes. And extremism, we know, is from the devil, because virtue's in the middle. So the devil's always trying to pull us out from virtue to do extremes. And extremism in this is, I'm going to overprotect my kids so they're never hurt in a relationship. I'm going to make sure I determine who they're friends with, what kind of friends they have. I'm going to even assign the friends to them. I've seen this happen, and try to
control it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then on the other hand, it's like, I'm just going to inject my kids into whatever and wherever, like, this school or this program with no supervision. And I just want them to be liked, and I want them to be involved in everything. Who cares? And then there's no conversation about that, and so then pretty soon they're hanging out with the kid who's, got them hooked on drugs, or, watching porn together, or whatever it is. And that happens all the time. I mean, you think your kids aren't watching porn with other parents' kids? Well, make sure, have those conversations, because it's happening,
Absolutely. A lot. Absolutely. Exactly. And so to further this point here, because this is an enemy, our roles as a father, as a man, right? Not to be overprotection, overbearing, right? Not to be so controlling, right? And you can just hear it. This idea of picking the friends that they're allowed to hang out with, telling them directly, not allowing them to go outside and hang out with friends, all things that I've seen and I've experienced, versus that premature injection, or that injection that we're to over injection, where we're talking about where they're just allowed to do anything, anywhere, to go anywhere, even putting them into like so many different sports and so many, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but I know what you're talking about is like getting them to like spread their social wings and just, learn how to relate to everybody, at the age of 5 or the age of 8, is a little bit ridiculous. So where can we bring it in to
So the
means?
argument against what you just said, or what we believe, is that, well, if I don't do that, my kids are going to be socially inept. They're going to be dorks. They're not going to have any friends. And I don't want them to have that experience in life. Nobody does. Nobody wants their kids to be isolated and marginalized and lonely. Who wants that for their kids? But just throwing them into whatever group and whatever kid that comes along unvetted, that's not a good idea either. So how do you do this? Basically, what's going on is kids default to social awkwardness. And so what they do then is that they end up getting involved with circles of people who are socially awkward, or people who aren't, and they kind of cling to them. And then they kind of learn how to be social in those circles. That's kind of normal. Well, I think that if we as dads, as fathers, have relationships, real relationships with our children, and we bring them into our life with our friends and the people we hang out with, and we get them involved in conversations, and not like, hey kids, you sit at that table and we'll sit at this table kind of thing, but like, look, you're part of the conversation. I want you to learn. I'm going to treat you in a sense like the adult that you're going to become. Those kids learn the adult jokes. They learn the humor. They learn the art of argumentation and thoughtful conversation, and they're more socially adept. And so at school, the other kids just kind of like them because they're thinking a little bit more smart. They're actually socially less awkward. And so that's the training ground to teach your child not to be socially awkward, but be able to give themselves to another rightfully, is by means of your relationship. That's it.
That's right.
I mean, it's like super simple.
You mentioned in your book, refrain from indoctrination as kind of the first step. And so I'd love for you to clarify that, because we talked about, growth and virtues. And that's absolutely something that we do by our conversations with them. We do by our openness to allowing them to engage socially with others, and then we are intentionally engaging with them, right? So like to the last point right there, I would say that we actually want to be with our kids. We actually show them that their worth and their value.
It gives them so much security and strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But talk about that refrain from indoctrination.
Well, doctrine is good, right? I mean, we need doctrine, but indoctrination is where we're like shoving it down their throats. We're almost like not brainwashing them, but and we're kind of just telling them what to believe without allowing them to question it or to discuss it. It's just, this is the way it is kind of thing. I don't think that works, because you do that long enough, eventually your child's just going to rebel, because you're teaching your child not to think for themselves. So the way that, at least what we would teach our children about how to have a relationship with God the Father, how to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, what that's all about, and then tackle the hard questions as they come. One of our daughters is big on, well, what if God doesn't exist? Or how do I know that God has a plan for me? This has happened and this is suffering, and how could God allow that to happen? Those are the great conversations, because it allows you to go deep, and it even maybe will test your faith and test okay, let me get that answer for you, or let me pray about that. But what it does, it shows your child, my dad's trustworthy. He actually cares about me, and he actually respects my thoughtfulness, or what I'm bringing, my line of reasoning, and he wants to discuss it with me. So I think that indoctrination versus conversation, where we're discovering truth together, like I might have a better handle on the truth than my 18-year-old daughter. However, I may not have some of the truth that she has, right? And so to have those conversations, but always guiding toward relationship, not just religion. See, religion is at the service of relationship. Indoctrination is not the service of relationship. It's a first service of imposing religion. Do this, don't do that, get with the program, no need to ask why. Relationship is, okay, we want to do this because we want God to be loved, or we want to be loved by God, or we want to enter into a relationship with others, and this is what a good relationship looks like. Yeah. So I guess so. So yeah, I think indoctrination is not going to work.
Yes, exactly. So we focus on step one is communication over indoctrination. Step two, just practicing those virtues and living our faith, virtues and faith, living it out well. And number three, intentionally engaging with our kids, wanting to be with them, wanting to spend time with them, showing them that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Those are all excellent. And I think at the end of the day, we have to like, so it's so easy to want to play the card. I just don't want to judge anyone. And so I'm going to refrain from, you know, talking about types of people and these people do this. No, you need to tell your kids that there are people who want to be good and there are people who want to follow evil. And there are people, all of them are created originally to be good and all of them have their own talents and gifts that are good. But there are really ultimately two types of people, well, three. There are those who want to use what's been given to them to glorify God. And when they do that, they experience his glory. There are those who take what God has given them and they glorify themselves. And then there's this group in between who's trying to figure out which one they want to be, right? But I can tell you this, there is only one group that's happy. And it's those who glorify God, right? And so these people over here who are glorifying themselves may appear to be happy, but like Mr. Beast said in a recent interview, he's the world's most prominent YouTuber, most wealthy YouTuber, and he's not happy. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, so good. So let's move on to the last point here. If you've made it this far in the episode, awesome. This is the bonus point that we wanted to bring up. Of course, this is not exhaustive, everything we're talking about.
Right.
And if there's extra things that you'd love for us to talk about, be sure to drop that in the comment section or send us an email at podcast@catholicgentleman.com. Love receiving those. But the final one, which we've kind of already been talking about, is poor parenting. And this is an enemy of our child, right? If you hadn't picked up on that and all of the talks and our roles as fathers and what we can do to live in the means and to communicate effectively and to grow in that relationship with our kids, this is one that we're just going to drive home here, is the consequences of poor parenting. But before we do about the distortion, right, let's talk about the good, right? Parents are essential. They're the essential means of our kids' protection and growth, both in education and in the faith. Their development as societal individuals, like we just talked about. God has given our children to us fathers as a reflective image of him, the Father, for them, right? And so all of these things are such great goods. And I mean, our children are the greatest blessing in our spousal relationship and in our marriage, after each other. And I think that this is such a beautiful thing that has been, again, distorted and twisted by society, both in all the wounds that people, all the identities that people are trying to grab hold of because they've gotten this wrong. And so, but the good is fully there. It's fully incredible. What a joy. And I'm so glad that he called me to be a father and to experience the wonder, the love, the joy in my life with my kids. So anything you'd add to the good before we go to the distortion?
Yeah. So there's a temptation. So parenting is so good. I love being a father like you do. And as the church tells us, we're the first teachers of the faith, etc. And really, I mean, it is at the same time a great blessing and probably perhaps the greatest burden. When God has entrusted a soul, an eternal soul, to your care, the level of responsibility we can't even fathom. It's so huge. So it's a great honor, but it's also a tremendous responsibility. So I think that there's two things, there's the idea of freedom and enslavement. Okay. And to be a good parent, I think you really have to understand the difference between the two, because parents who tend to feel guilty about parenting, they feel like they're enslaving their children with discipline or enslaving their children with, okay, do this and don't do that kind of thing. So they falsely believe that the world affords freedom. Do whatever you want, just you make your own decisions regarding your faith. You make your own decisions regarding, who you're hanging out with all the time, etc. But that doesn't work in real life. You think about it, okay, I have a baby. You know what? my toddler, I'm just going to let you decide what you want to eat. Like, well, you just go for it. I'm going to let you decide what you want to watch on TV. You make your own choices. No, there's a period of protection that facilitates injection into society. And it's a both and. So you teach your child to eat their fruits, their vegetables, whatever, a good diet, so that when they get older, they can make the proper choices and know when to indulge and know when not to, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to protect to inject. And if we can't get other, and so this is the idea, discipline actually cultivates freedom.
Yeah.
If it's done right. And lack of discipline is actually child abuse. Neglect. It's neglect, because what you're doing is you're teaching your child to be enslaved to every whim and fancy and indulgence that exists.
Every passion and pleasure and every desire that every media temptation that's been sent it to them is you're not. And that's exactly right. And what we're talking about here, and I always like to come to this, is the difference between discipline and punishment, right? If we're punishing our kids just because they irritated us, because they annoy us, because we wanted to do this and they're requiring us to do this, grow up, right? The point of discipline is for character development, is for growth in virtue and in the faith. And that's where we're getting to what you were just saying, is that discipline is preparing them for something greater in life, to be a greater individual, to be somebody that is less selfish and more self-giving and more able to understand that a life in service of others, in service of the greatest good, is a life well lived, is a life that is infectious in what God is calling us to do. And it takes discipline to do that, because we're not born with the understanding that we are supposed to be selfless. I mean, you see it. I see it in my kids all the time. Concupiscence, right? They have to have two things, one in each hand. And if there's a third thing, they have to figure out how they can grab it to control it, right? If we're not guiding that, if we're not conversing with them, but also guiding them through discipline, we're going to just, yes, like you stated, I like that so well, is that we're going to teach them to be enslaved to their passions and desires.
Yeah. So there's extremes in this, right? So we can teach, this is the overprotective parent is the one who teaches his child basically that everything is bad. Sex is bad, television is bad, the internet's bad, everything is so bad. So we've got to keep you from that to keep you good. That's not the right approach, And then you've got the unprotective dad or parent who's like, everything is good, just go for it. You don't need any protection. And no, the golden mean here is okay, let's protect to inject, as we said earlier. But what we're doing is all along the way, this is the, gosh, we're looking at this. The fundamental factor of everything is that you have a relationship with your child. Like, you really invest in that child so that you walk along with them in their decisions regarding television, internet use, driving the car, who their friends are, whatever it is, you're walking that road along with them. And yes, it's exhausting, but when they end up being 25, what they say, I've heard this before. If you fear the tears now, you will reap them later. Like, meaning, if you don't discipline your child now, the world will discipline your child.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Life, and so,
wow.
Yeah. So what is discipline? Discipline is simply teaching your child that everything God's created is good. Now, how do we use that good? How do we use it properly so that I become good? How I can become great? That's fundamentally what's going on. I
love it. What a great point to end this public edition of the episode. I really do hope that our listeners got a lot out of this, as much as we did, putting into it. So, Devin, I'm really grateful for that. If you like what we're talking about inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus, we're going to go into 2 additional enemies. We have 2 more. I know it just doesn't stop. But it's, again, all the battle plan and what we can do to be better fathers in protecting our kids. Yes.
Do you want to just review the 4 P's that we've discussed?
4, well stated. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. So the first one that we discussed is perversion perversion of sex. The next one that we talked about is pervasive media, right? Then we talked about peer pressure, And we finished with this bonus one as just being poor parents. And actually, I don't mind sharing. Inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus, we're going to talk about the enemy of popularity and pursuit of prestige, and how we can unintentionally or intentionally cause that in the lives of our children. And then we're also going to talk about pursuit of pleasure and what needs to be done in a greater detail. So we're at a point here in the episode, we love to have this section on putting on the new man, right? This is the challenge. So if you are a father and your kids are still in the home, you are going to take them out on a daddy-son time or a daddy-daughter date. You're going to do something like that in this coming week. That's the challenge. If your kids are not in the house anymore, you're going to make the opportunity to call them. You are going to call them up. You're going to be intentional about reaching out to them, to connect with them and continue building that relationship. God the Father doesn't stop pursuing us. We cannot stop pursuing our children.
Amen.
And
Amen.
Finally, if you don't have any kids, pray for all of us who do. We are in desperate need of your prayers. So please offer up a prayer in your morning or nightly prayer for us fathers. So Devin, thanks so very much for the conversation today. And as we end each of our episodes,
be a man, be a saint.